So Laura Holland has been teaching English for nearly 35 years. At the University of Oregon, she teaches English language and teacher education in the American English Institute and the Department of Linguistics. Ms. Holland is also the external reviewer and works annually with teachers in the ICPNA, Chiclayo. I'm not sure what it stands for, but it's the Binational Center in Peru. She's published numerous articles on language teaching, mentoring, and classroom observation, and co-authored the teacher training guidebook, Shaping the Way We Teach from Observation to Action, which was published by the US Department of State. And she's presented teacher training workshops across the US, Canada, Peru, Mexico, Cambodia, Costa Rica virtually. And our second presenter is Janine Sepulveda, and she's a classroom teacher trainer from the University of Oregon as well. She has 30 years of experience in the field, and she's worked with students and teachers from over 50 countries. She also taught English as a foreign language in South Korea, the Netherlands, and Mexico, and she's conducted lots of teacher training workshops in Mexico, Chile, Dominican Republic, and Vietnam. So they are going to give us the talk using authentic materials to engage students and motivate learning. So please welcome them with a warm virtual applause. If your camera's on, maybe give them a thumbs up or a nice wave. All right, Janine, Laura.
All right. Thank you so much, Mark. And thank you all. Thank you, Lily and Jonathan, for this amazing opportunity. It's so great to be with the really motivated and inspired teachers in Costa Rica. So let me just start with a really warm, like, hey, Costa Rica, what's up? Let's get going. I am so impressed. It's Friday afternoon. We're still in a pandemic and you are here. So that tells you a lot. That inspires and motivates us. And we hope that we're going to give you a fun and informative session today. We're still digital immigrants, and so we're still dealing with various bits of technology, so please have patience with us, but we're going to just, everybody, we're all going to do our best, as we always do. By the way, I should just say in that bio that Janine Sepulveda is one of my co-authors on that book. She didn't have it in her bio, but she is one of the co-authors of the Shaping the Way We Teach publication that we had. Also, I noticed Annabelle, Annabelle Mora maybe, and another name I didn't quite catch, is a newcomer here. So thanks for coming, and we hope you have a great time. So we're going to talk about authentic materials, all about them and what to use, what we can do. Oops, let's see. But let's start with a little bit of a warm up. Now, let me move all of you up here. Okay, so just a quick little warm up. What is or are some food ingredients? Okay, and there's your, I'm going to sometimes ask you to do this as a teacher and sometimes as a participant student so that you can feel what our activities feel like. So my directions to you as students are, what is or are some food ingredients that you've had trouble finding during the pandemic, maybe especially in the early days? So go ahead and please type those into the chat right now. We're going to sometimes ask you to, we're going to step back for a second sometimes and ask you to think with your teacher hat, put your teacher hat on. But right now, just go ahead and do this. So let's see. Okay, flour. Yeah, we had that too. Avocado. Oh, so sad when we can't get avocado. Breakfast cereal. Yeah, toilet paper in the US for sure. But food ingredients, we're talking about food ingredients here, but that was the first one that popped in my mind too, because that was a crisis for quite a while. I actually had to get up at 6 in the morning to go get toilet paper one day because that was the only way you could get it. Cornbread mix, pasta, potatoes, brown sugar. Okay, great, exactly. So we have the idea about ingredients. You can keep on going, adding those in. Now another pre-listening activity, I'm going to ask you which of these is a ladle. Okay, number 1, number 2, or number 3, which is a ladle. 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2. Okay, woohoo! You got it. 100 points for everybody. So that's exactly right. Now, just stepping back to put your teacher hat on for a second, this is a fabulous way to just pre-work with some vocabulary, but rather than just saying, here's what a ladle is, here's the definition, right? This gives it sort of like a little bit of discovery learning for our students. So now that we've talked about ladles, we're going to watch a brief video clip. Now, if you were in my session that Mark talked about 2 years ago at the conference, I showed this video clip then also. Please don't give it away. Don't say anything yet in the chat if you do know this one, if you saw this already. It's about a minute, a little more than a minute and a half. And what you will see is that I'm doing something completely different with it today than what I did last week. When you have an authentic material, you can use it again and again. So let's play. Okay, so I did forget, bad teacher, I forgot to give my instructions beforehand that while you're watching to please write down every ingredient that the speaker mentions. Yeah, I will put the link to this video on the in the community of practice, but also if you just look up SNL quarantine cooking, this video will come up on YouTube. And I can put that in the chat in a minute also. So let's see, Eugenia, salt and water. Good, anybody else? What other ingredients did you hear? There was also one more she did mention that wasn't in the iodized salt. Ooh, nice vocabulary. Look at that. Water and salt, water, good. What else? Anybody else? Chicken broth. Let's see. Yeah, sorry?
Oh, chicken broth. I was just saying.
Chicken broth. Excellent. Exactly. All right. Exactly. So here is something that you can do. We're not going to continue on with this, but this is something you can do. Get your students to listen for something in particular. I'll talk about this again later in the presentation. It becomes kind of a version of oral skimming and scanning sometimes, right? We do it for reading all the time, but we don't do it enough for listening skills. Okay. Oops. Wrong direction.
Hey guys.
Nope. So, and we did that already. Now, here is something I would love to share with you. This is a technique. Maybe you have done this if you've been in one of my workshops before, but I'm having trouble moving the, I'm having trouble moving the chat. It's in the way.
It's not in the way for me, Laura, so.
It's kind of in the way for me, but oops,
Do it.
Let's see. No, I can do it. Oh, I know what I can do. Hold on. Yeah, there we go. Okay, we're in business now. So here's what I'd like everybody to do now. Mark, can you please unmute everybody?
Sure.
Now, all of my students know that this is my gesture that I use when I want everybody to repeat after me, whether I'm in a face-to-face class or online on Zoom. So in just a moment, Mark is going to unmute everybody. And what I'm going to ask you to do is to repeat every line after me. Now, it will be a little bit jumbled because of the time difference and different amounts of bandwidth that people have, but that's okay. Just listen to yourself, listen to me, and try it with your mouth. So are we ready? Okay.
Yes, everyone will just have to click their microphone so that it opens, right? But now you have the ability to open your mics.
So go ahead and unmute yourselves, please. And we're gonna get ready now. Everybody ready? All right, here we go. Repeat after me. You.
You.
To you.
To you.
Okay, now careful, because what we're trying to do is imitate the way, the real way that she actually says it. So we're not saying to you, we're saying to, right? To you, okay? That's how she said it. You, let's try again.
You.
To you.
To you.
Up to you.
Up to you.
To you.
Totally up to you.
Totally up to you.
Is totally up to you.
It's totally up to you.
Now, okay, now careful. Add is totally up to you.
It's totally up to you.
It's totally up to you.
You add is totally up to you.
You
add
totally
up to you.
To you.
Salt you add is totally up to you.
Salt
You add totally up to you.
Now I'm going to skip the next one and I'm going to go straight to how much. How much salt you add is totally up to you.
How much
salt
you add is
totally
totally
up
up
to
to you.
Now how much salt you add is totally up to you.
Now,
How much
salt
salt
you add
is
is
totally
totally
up
up
To
to you.
you.
Woohoo! All right, nice job. So you can you can mute yourselves again. And just a couple of things to notice about this technique. I was taught this, more than 30 years ago. And back in the 70s, Charles Curran and Jenny Bell Reardon called it backward buildup. More recently, Penny and Scott Thornbury called it back chaining or backward chaining. And it's really great for practicing pronunciation, but also stress and intonation. And it's just a fabulous way to help our students get their mouths around these longer sentences. Now, they say best to use it with only maybe 10 words or more, 9 or 10. The first time you do it with students, I would say don't go longer than this one sentence. However, it's also, I have done it with much longer sentences with intermediate and above students, and they love it. It's really fun. And this back chaining technique can also be applied to, for example, a long multi-syllabic word. For example, uncharacteristic. So let's say you're teaching academic English and your students are having trouble getting their mouths around some of these long academic multi-syllabic words. So then you can just say, we won't really do this now, but it's just tick, ristic, touristic, characteristic, uncharacteristic. So you can build it up just from one long word, and they find that then suddenly you take them through and they can get their mouths around it. So it's just fabulous, fabulous practice. I also learned this for English because they said English was a stress-timed language, but over the last 15 years or so, I've been applying it to other languages and also chanting, and it works perfectly. I highly recommend you take this and use it. And students love it. I do a little bit of this almost every day. So some possible pair work or homework that you could do with this. So this is a follow-up homework I did after showing this in my class. And I did this 3 times now, every term that I was teaching during the pandemic so far. And I asked my students for homework for follow-up to make a video describing a simple recipe. I told them they could use a dictionary to look up words that they weren't sure of. And I said, if you don't know how to cook, don't worry, tell us how to make tea or toast or something super simple. And don't forget to use your adverbs of sequence, such as first you do this, next you do that, blah, 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 later, then, after that. Okay, so it's a great way to practice the sequencing adverbs of sequence as well. Oops. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Janine now.
Okay, hi everyone, can you hear me? Yep, okay, great. Okay, so what Laura just demonstrated was a whole bunch of activities around one authentic material. And she didn't go into a lot of explanation about what she was doing or why, because we wanted you to experience it, but we're going to go deeper into that explanation now. And so what we're going to cover today is just the tip of the iceberg. We were working on this. We came up with like 6 hours of materials, and it was really hard to cut it down because there's so many great things you can do with authentic materials. So we just get to show you just a tiny fraction of what you can actually do with authentic materials. Oops. Oh, Laura, can you change the slide? Laura's in charge of the PowerPoint. Okay. So first thing is, what are authentic materials? So I've been doing teacher training for a long time, and what I found is that often teachers don't have a clear idea of what authentic materials are. So I think it's really useful to start out with what that definition is. give you the first point. Okay, so these are materials not created or edited expressly for language learners. So these are not materials that are designed for language learners or altered in any way for language learners. Instead, they're materials that are created by and for fluent speakers of language of a certain language within that language community for purposes of communication. So that could be a newspaper, movie, videos, letter to the editor, whatever, emails, something that two fluent speakers, they don't have to be native speakers, but two fluent speakers of a language are creating, or one for the next, right? So one speaker is creating it for another speaker or a group of speakers of that same language. So we're not talking about things that are designed for language students. And then next line. So another important thing to remember is that authentic materials always contain language. That's the point, is that our students are being exposed to authentic, real language in the way that it is used in a given language community. So pictures and realia are not authentic materials, even though they're great. We love using pictures in our classes. You can do so many things with pictures. Also realia. So if you're teaching fruits and vegetables in your English class and you bring in a carrot, an apple, an orange, and a banana, also great materials for language teaching, but they're not authentic materials because they don't contain language. And that's an important distinction. So we're not saying don't use pictures in realia, because you should, but they're just not authentic materials. All right, so we're going to do a little quiz here. Which of the following are authentic materials? And you can use the reaction buttons, green check mark for yes, and a red X for no. So first one, next slide, Laura. Is this an authentic material? Yes or no? Oh, and I can't see the reaction, so maybe some, oh, okay. Or you can just type it in the chat, that's fine. Okay, I'm getting lots of no's. Exactly. Okay, so except for the part that says iStock, that's because I had to use a free photo to not steal somebody's picture. But yeah, this is actually could be a great prompt for some kind of activity in your language class, but it's not an authentic material because it doesn't contain any language. All right, next slide, Laura. So is this an authentic material? So you can just type yes or no in the chat. I think that works fine. Okay, and everyone's saying yes, awesome. Okay, so yeah, this is a famous comic in the United States written by an English speaker for other speakers of English. Notice that the language is not very complex or complicated, but it's written for speakers in a given language community. So yes, it is an authentic material. All right, and next slide. Is this an authentic material? Okay, so this is interesting. Okay, I like this. Yes, no, not sure, not sure. I'm really
More of a mix, yeah.
Yeah, there's a mix, and that's why I chose this example, because in my work with teachers, often they think if they find something online, it's an authentic material. But in this case, this is Oxford Online English. This is written for learners of English, not for fluent speakers of English. And this is written for instructional purposes for students, not for communication amongst fluent speakers of English. So this is a great tool to have, but it is not an authentic material because it is designed for language learners. Not saying you shouldn't use it. I use this kind of stuff all the time for my students when they need it. It's awesome, but it's just not an authentic material. Okay, and this was created, yes, by language teachers for language students. So it's for pedagogical purposes, not for communication between people of the same language community. All right, last one. Is this an authentic material? And everyone's saying yes, yay, exactly. Okay, so obviously anywhere in the English speaking world, when it's somebody's birthday, this is the song that we sing, right? So even though the language is not complicated, it's very simple, it is authentic, an authentic material because it's used amongst people in the same language community for a specific purpose. Okay, excellent. Everyone passes the quiz. Okay, so I want to go into a little bit about why to use authentic materials in class, because Laura and I are also classroom teachers. We know how full our curricula are. Maybe we have to cover so many chapters of a textbook in a week or two and give tests on a regular basis. And it's difficult to bring in anything else. However, we think that there are some reasons why it's really worthwhile to bring some authentic materials into class. So if you can give me the first point there, Laura. Okay, so the first thing is is introduces students to real language that's not found in textbooks. And it really makes the language come alive for students. So often I think our students feel like when they're studying English, that's just something that exists in the textbook and not in the real world. And our job as English teachers is to say, oh no, this is a real thing that happens in the real world. And there are real living, breathing people who speak this. So it really helps students, I think, to connect to the importance or the relevance of learning another language. And the example I like to use for this, because I also teach beginning English sometimes, is if you're teaching greetings in your class, what's in the textbook? Hello, how are you? I'm fine, thank you. How are you? I'm fine also. Something along that line, right? Which people do use, that's real, right? But I have never seen a textbook that says, hey, what's up? Or, hey, how's it going? Or just, what up? Okay, so these are things that people actually say a lot in real life, and we can't find those in textbooks. So, and those are the kind of fun things that make our students a little more excited about learning another language. All right, next point, Laura. Okay, so what this does then is it enhances the interest of learning English, and it helps our students become more motivated. And I think, you know, probably anybody who's spent more than 10 minutes as a teacher knows that motivation is key for our students to learn anything. The more we can motivate them, the more they're going to learn. So authentic materials really do help with interest and motivation. And okay. The other thing that using authentic materials can do is provide students with a sense of challenge, because they're like, oh, I've only ever seen textbook language and now I'm seeing like real language. So there's that sense of challenge. But when they succeed at doing something with that real language, they also have a profound sense of accomplishment. And I remember, back like slightly after all the dinosaurs died off, when I was in high school, I took 4 years of French, and only one time did I ever hear anything that was actually outside of the textbook. Of course, this is pre-internet, but it was so exciting for me to listen. It was a song. I got to hear the song, and it was so exciting for me to go like, oh, I didn't understand everything. But I'm like, oh, I understand some of this. Like, this is real French. This is what it sounds like, and I can understand some. So that was a great sense of accomplishment for me, and it was very confidence raising. And okay, the other thing that authentic materials allow us to do is tailor those materials to our students' interests and needs. So I'm not saying anything bad about textbooks. We all use them. They're very useful for us as teachers, but they're written for a very generic audience. And sometimes our students' interests and needs are a little bit different. Oh, how do you do? I don't know if anyone says how do you do. I'm sorry, I was just got distracted by the chat. And so we can take whatever the language points are of the textbook chapters that we're studying in a given week or a given unit and find materials that are a little more related to what makes our students excited and what they're interested in. So they allow us to personalize our classes. And then finally, they incorporate cultural elements into our lessons. And as we know, as language teachers, culture is a very big part of teaching language. And of course, some of that is included in our textbooks, but we can bring even more in to our classes by using authentic materials. Okay, next slide, Laura. Thanks. Okay, the other misconception I would say that a lot of teachers have is that we can only use authentic materials with advanced students, which of course we can. We can use them with advanced students, and we really should be using them with our advanced students. But I believe, and Laura also believes, that we can use authentic materials successfully with all levels and all ages of learners. And one thing we want to really encourage you to think about today is how you could use authentic materials with your beginning learners and your young learners, as well as your older and more advanced learners. So a few tips on that. Number one, you just need to choose your materials carefully. If you're working with beginning to low intermediate students, you probably don't want to give them a New York Times article. That might not be a good fit there. But the second thing is, don't require or expect students to understand everything. And this is huge. And this is something we're going to be demonstrating today as we go through the different things. So I see a question in the chat about how do we use AM with beginners. We are going to talk about that and show you some examples of how to do that. It's an excellent question. So the first thing we have to do is, if we don't require them to understand everything, because if you do that, you're setting your students up for failure, and then it's very demotivating instead of motivating. All right. Next line, Laura. Instead, what you can do is choose just one focus and create activities that students can succeed at with the appropriate level of challenge. So instead of giving them something and say, okay, now you have to understand everything that's happening here, maybe you just focus on a vocabulary piece or a pronunciation piece, like Laura did in the warm-up, where she wasn't saying, summarize the video. She was saying, we're just going to focus on a little pronunciation part here, or maybe it's one grammar point, something like that. So we can break it down into something smaller. That's just right for the level of our students. Do we have another line on this one? Okay, so students really love encountering real language, and it gives them a lot of confidence when they can succeed at a task that uses authentic materials. So we have, as teachers, have to be very careful about how we approach that. But if we do it in the right way, we're going to really foster a lot of motivation and confidence in our students. So we just have a couple screens of tips, and then we're going to jump into some activities. So the first one is, you don't have to use authentic materials all the time. We know as busy classroom teachers, you've got enough on your plate just getting through the curriculum that you already have. But just a little bit of authentic material here and there can make a big difference. And so in terms of being efficient with your time investment, it's really helpful to find resources that can be used and reused and reused and reused. And we're going to show you something that we've both been using for 25 years and it still works. So that was totally worth our time investment.
Mm.
And then it can be used with different levels. So you can find something that you could use with your beginning learners, your intermediate learners, your advanced learners, etc. And then make sure that you're finding materials that are relevant both to your students and your curriculum, because any authentic materials you bring into your class really should be supporting the curriculum and the student learning outcomes that you are responsible for. And I think we just have one more. Oh, and I mentioned this before, but I like to repeat things. Instead of, again, covering everything, choose a specific focus for each task or activity. And this one I think is super, super important. Don't edit the text, don't simplify it. If you do that, it's no longer an authentic material. Okay, so again, don't give your beginning 6-year-olds a New York Times article. Obviously, that goes without saying, but you know, even something that you think might be a little challenging for your students, resist the urge to edit it, because then again, it's no longer an authentic material. It's designed for language learners. What you want to do instead, next slide, is grade the task according to your students' level. Create something that they are capable of doing with this, you know, maybe it's a little bit challenging, but they're still capable of succeeding at it. And I think we have one more point here. And another thing that to emphasize, Laura and I do this in our classes all the time, no matter whether we're using authentic materials or textbooks or anything else. It's okay for our students to not understand everything. In fact, that is part of learning a language, right? There's so many times when you're like, okay, I think I got like 50% of that. That is part of the challenge of learning a language, and it's part of a skill you have to develop when you're learning a language, to know that I'm not going to understand everything, but I'm going to get everything I can from it. So encouraging our students, if we give them something a little bit hard, say, it's okay. You don't have to understand everything. Don't freak out. Don't worry. Okay, so I'm going to turn it over to Laura just for a minute, and then we will go into some activities.
We're going to do a quick chat bomb. Now, by the way, just, you know, I work with all different kinds of students. So if I'm working with people who are coming from war zones, for example, I don't use the term chat bomb. We call it a chat cascade or something different. Because I work with groups of students who are coming from war zones and are traumatized by that, you know, and so chat bomb is doesn't have the funny idea that it does for people who aren't dealing with war zones. So given the official definition of authentic materials, what authentic materials have you used in your classes? A few people have already put them in. Go ahead and put them in right now. Let's share those really quickly. And then Janine, I think we're running a little below on time. So, I mean, for both of us, we knew that this was going to happen because there's just so much to do. So I think maybe you keep putting these into the chat, because you should also know you usually can save the chat on these things, and then that becomes a nice little resource.
Yeah, so, and everything I'm seeing in the chat is exactly, you know, these are all great examples.
These are all great. These are all excellent authentic materials.
All right, so I'm gonna speed things up a little bit here. And so when Laura and I were talking about how to do this in the limited time we have, we decided to break it down into 3 different categories of how to approach authentic materials. So the first is using one resource for multiple levels of language learners. And then the second is using one resource for multiple skills, vocabulary, pronunciation, grammar, reading, writing, listening, you know, those kinds of things. And then finally, because we're still living in a pandemic world, how you might use one resource for a face-to-face class versus a remote Zoom class or an asynchronous online class. Again, we're trying to get the most bang for our buck for any given authentic material we might use. Okay, so here we have a typical supermarket advertisement from a supermarket in the United States. This is very common. I found this online. And I'm sorry that you can't see all the pictures at the bottom, but when I use this with my students, you can actually see all of those pictures at the bottom. So I just wanted to talk briefly about 3 different ways you could use something as simple as a supermarket advertisement. So if you're working with beginners, you might do something like just give them a chart to fill out, and they have to write the name of the food. Maybe you've been studying food names already, but they get to see like, oh, what do people actually eat in the United States or England or Australia, wherever you want to pull that information from. And then they can write down the name of the food. They can write down the price. So then they're getting a little bit, especially if you talk about it afterwards, they're getting a little bit of practice with numbers as well. So how do you say $1.99? And what is LB? What the heck is that? Because nobody in the world uses that except crazy Americans. Or 4 for $5. Like, how do you even say that? You can see it, you can read it, you can understand it, but how do you say it? So it's a very simple language practice activity. And then a very simple question like, do you like it? Yes or no. They may encounter foods they've never seen before. And then you can talk about, what is this food? You know, those kinds of things. So this is one simple activity that you could use with beginning learners. And then the next one, maybe your students are a little bit more advanced. Excuse me. So you might give them some longer questions. Can you just put them all up there, Laura? I think that would be easier. Maybe you've been studying comparatives in English. So more expensive, cheaper. When do you use ER? When do you use more in front of an adjective? That kind of thing. So they have a little bit more challenge there in terms of the language that they're dealing with this authentic material. And this could be a writing activity. It could be a pair activity where they're talking about it. But they're engaging in a little bit more language at this level. And then on our next slide, more advanced. I wouldn't say this is for super advanced students, but more advanced. You might have them do some kind of group discussion. Which 3 items would you like to eat for dinner? How much would it cost if you buy a pound of each? So again, you're bringing in that pound thing. You've got some math in there. They're talking to discuss what they would like to eat. They're using numbers. Or you're having a party at your house. You can spend only $50. What would you buy for the party? Again, they have to discuss, oh, I don't like shrimp. I like steak. I don't like steak. I prefer crab. You know, those kinds of things. Again, discussion, vocabulary, numbers, math, those kinds of things. And then, you know, also, whoops, all right, we're back. If you really want to get in deep into the how does the pound ounce system work, you might give them a question like, how many grams of grapes can you buy for $5? And 1 pound equals 453 grams. So there's a little bit of that cultural element there as well. Okay. So I'm not going to stay on that one any much longer because I know we're running behind. But that's just a simple example of how you can take one authentic material and use it at different levels of language skill. So the other way you can approach using authentic materials is to use one authentic material for multiple language skills. And so here we're going to use a song. This is the song I said that Laura and I have been using for 25 years, and it still works perfectly. Our students love it. And you could focus on, and we'll show you a few examples, focusing on grammar, prepositions, verb tenses, kind of speaking drill, and listening comprehension at a novice or more advanced level. Okay, so we're going to jump into this. And Laura, if we could just play the first stanza, what we
just the first, I'm just going to play the first 2 real fast since they come up. Okay, sorry, that's all I'm going to, yeah, Neil, right? Actually, a student of mine gave me this song for the first time in 1987, and that is how long I have been using this. And it's actually a song from 1982, but it's well known over the whole world. A lot of people don't know it by the song, but then you start playing and they're like, oh yeah, I know this song. And it's fabulous. It's got so many applications. We are just tip of the iceberg of what we're about to show you here.
Oh yeah, we could come up with 25 activities for this song easily.
Oh.
And what's funny is even like this song was written before most of my students were born. But I use this in class and I'll go out in the hallway and I can hear them going, like it sticks in their head and they love it. So it works. So here you can see I've taken out the prepositions from this song, and I just want to show you a short activity that you could use on our next slide.
I am sitting.
There we go.
So one way you can use this, and students don't have to understand the whole song, they don't have to be advanced, but if you're teaching prepositions of time, location, and direction, which most textbooks include, maybe you've already taught that from the textbook. And then they listen and they just fill in the prepositions. So there's a little bit of listening practice there. It's not too hard. It's not overwhelming for them. Although sometimes, you know, the difference between in and on can be hard to hear for non-native speakers. So they get to have that little bit of listening practice. And then after they're done and they've got all their prepositions filled in, then you just have them categorize those prepositions according to time, location, or direction. So they're getting a little more reinforcement of what they've studied in the textbook, but in a way more entertaining way. And you're actually getting some listening practice in there as well. All right, and next one, I love to do this one in my grammar classes because this song is so awesome for verb tenses and time frames. In this song, we have simple present, present progressive, past perfect, past progressive, simple past, future. It's pretty much got it all. And so I love to use this after I've been teaching verb tenses in my grammar class.
The other thing, I'm just going to quickly jump in and say that I've used, so any song or lyrics of songs you can use as your text, right? That becomes your new text. And so then I'll say things like, and transcripts also, I transcribe all the scenes that I use, and then those become texts that we can use. And so then I can say things like, all right, everybody, put this all in the past tense. So then, and don't forget to change the time markers too. So they have to really go through, and then I put them in pairs to do it. So they have to negotiate and talk it out. And it's really effective. They have a great time working with this. Okay, next slide.
Yes, please. So the way I use this in my class, and I think there are probably 50 other ways you could do that, just focusing on tenses, is, you know, after we've studied the tenses and done the practice from the textbook, I'll have them listen and fill in the blanks. I'll take out the verbs this time instead of the prepositions. So there's a little bit of listening practice there. And then when we're done, I'll say, okay, you guys get in groups and you have to make a timeline of the story events. What happened first? What happened after that? What's happening all at the same time? What's going to happen in the future? And they really dig in, because if you know this song, it starts all in the present, and then it goes to the past, and then it goes to the future, and then it goes back to the present. And so oftentimes textbooks, I know they're trying to simplify language for our students, and I understand why, but they'll be like, oh, you can only be in the past, or you can only be in the present. Well, that's not really how language works. And this is a great example. Or everything's chronological, right? Like we started in the past and now we're moving to the present and then we're going to the future. No, that's not how it works. So this is a great way for them to see how that's actually happening. And they do understand it, they get it, and they make these beautiful timelines. And then they'll argue like, no, this came first, that came second. And you know, we work it out as a class, and it's so much more fun than doing just one more exercise in the textbook. Yeah.
That they will not be able to use when they get out the door. And so we want to try to create authentic activities that mirror the authentic materials, if that makes sense to you. Because the textbook stuff just somehow sucks the life out of every bit of language that we do. So we want to use authentic materials to breathe life back into the language as it's meant to be listened to and communicated with.
Mm-hmm. All right, and I think you're going to take over here, Laura.
Yes. So
these are
here's
Laura's
just
activities with
Oh.
the same song. Yes, go ahead.
Yes. So same song, and this is just the first two stanzas because, as Janine said, we've both been using this song for decades now. And so one of the things, and I have used this with every single level, including my novice learners. And so this one, the first two stanzas here, I'm sitting in the morning at the diner on the corner. So let's have a look at that. So what I do is I give my students, I put them in pairs in face-to-face classes. I give them each a sheet. They have a sheet with all the lyrics all on one page. And then they have a sheet of these questions here that correspond. And I number them so that each set of questions goes with each stanza. So these questions go with stanza 1. These questions go with stanza 2. And this is short answer pair practice. And they have a blast with this. So we go through it together the first couple of times to make sure that everybody gets what to do. But how does it work? So we say, what's one person, one of the pair says, what's she doing at the diner? She's sitting. Where is she? At the diner. What's she doing? She's waiting. When is she at the diner? In the morning. Who is she? Suzanne Vega, because they know that they have the whole sheet with that. Why is she there? She's for coffee. And then many of these have multiple answers, just like real language, right? This second stanza, for example, what's she waiting for? For the man, or for the man to pour the coffee. Where is she waiting? At the counter. Who's she waiting for? The man. Why is she waiting? For him to pour the coffee, or some other shorter version. So again, these are ways to practice in a meaningful way short answers that we use in spoken speech all the time to go with this. Then you could also have them practice longer ones too. Absolutely. This is just one tiny little thing that I've done with it, but my students have loved this.
And just one more thing to add to that really quickly, Laura, is you've supplied the questions, but I know students have a really hard time learning question formation in English because it's kind of crazy, right? So another thing is they could write all the questions for each other, right? And practice that question making. And it's still based in a context because it's based on what's happening in the song.
Exactly. And then sometimes for follow-up homework, I'll have them write this question out more formally and write the short version of it. And because I observe a lot of classes and teachers, and one of the things, especially if you are teaching in a non-native English speaking country and you yourself are a non-native speaker, one thing I have observed a lot of is teachers who are kind of avoiding the question format, the traditional question format, and just using the statement format with rising intonation. Nothing wrong with that, unless that's the only thing you're doing with your students. And then you are actually not giving them the opportunity to use and practice the traditional question formation and the crazy way we do that, that we make those for our, in class. So we do want to make sure we give them practice with both. There we go. Okay, so after listening, so what are some things that we can do after listening? One comprehension check activity that I've done. And again, we have weeks of materials to go with just this one song. So we're only just sharing a few little bits with you. But for example, even with my beginning learners, I had assigned each student a stanza or a pair. You could have the two people working together either way, and ask them to draw what is going on in each stanza, as opposed to writing or speaking. It's just an alternate way, but you will to show comprehension. But you'll be kind of amazed at what they can do here, even at the very novice levels. And every single time I've ever done this, somebody in the class becomes discovered as an artist, and usually it's one of the people who's never spoken or really quiet, and suddenly they becomes like, whoa, look what Yising can do. Oh my gosh, who knew she could draw like this? It's amazing. So it just connects all your students together again as well.
And that's also very confidence building, maybe for a student who's shyer or quieter. And then they're being recognized, like they understand and they're communicating that comprehension in a different way. That's very confidence building for our students. Yeah,
exactly. Other thing you can do, listening comprehension or discussion or writing. So I ask these same questions through different modalities, depending on if it's my speaking class, is it my writing class, which class is it? What's the mood of the singer-songwriter? How is she feeling? And if you're working with lower levels, for example, you can give them like a word bank or sentence frames to work with. Higher levels, they can just use the vocabulary that they have. So this can be used as a springboard to have further discussions about things. I mean, and this can go off in talking about relationships, romance, any number of different topics.
Oh, sure. And I'm loving the suggestions from Eugenia in the chat, like other ideas for how to use this song. Yeah.
I love that. I'm singing in the morning. Yeah, I had a student teacher or an intern one time who substituted different verbs for that. And that was really, really fun. All right, we are nearly at 3. What do we think, Janine? Should we?
I think we should bust through and keep it
and then go straight to questions.
And then we could skip the task maybe and go straight to questions. Yeah.
Will everybody be will you be brokenhearted if we don't do the test? Because I think we just have a couple more activities and then we want to go to questions. Thank you, Lynn. Bye. All right, I'm going to play this very brief video clip, and this is just as soon as I find my cursor. There we go. Here we go. So no explanation first. Now in this case, we're just going to show you the clip. Okay, so some follow-up ideas then very quickly. We want to just show you 3 different ways that we would use this same clip depending on the context that you're teaching in. So face-to-face classes or Zoom or other synchronous classes or asynchronous classes or for homework. So in a face-to-face class, maybe how many different ways can you think of to say, I want the keys or a greeting, right? So this is a great way to activate their schemata, as we say, to activate their background knowledge. Or you can watch it the first time with the sound off. I know lots of teachers know how to do this. And then write down or discuss what's being said with your partner, then watch it again with the sound. And then students can, for example, fill in a closed chart or discuss with their partners. While listening task, you can ask them to listen and compare with their partner and notice how Larry says, thank you. What words does he actually use? Or again, I talked about this earlier, we do lots of skimming and scanning in reading and writing, but we forget to do it for listening. And it's really critically important for listening skills. And so we can ask them, how many times, listen really carefully, how many times does he say the word no? Okay, count them out. And then if they need more help, you can give them a hint and say there were 3 different times, add them all up for a total. So he goes, no, no, no. No, 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 no. So 9 total is just, so have them listening for specific words or what's a synonym for blah, 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 right? You can have them listening for very specific vocabulary or information.
Now, really quickly, Laura, sorry, I'll keep it really brief, but I love this clip so much because the language is really simple, actually, and you have all the visuals to support the language. And so you can use this with not very advanced students. And I always have them say, think of how many ways you can say, I want the keys, or what's your name? Because he uses multiple ways. And then if students brainstorm that before they watch, and then they come up with the answers and they actually hear them during the video clip, again, that's very confidence building. They're like, oh, I can think of 3 ways to say, I want the keys or what's your name? And he used all of them. And that's a super important skill, in addition to building their confidence, to be able to figure out different ways to say something in language. And then they're having that confirmed by this native speaker who's doing it very naturally. All right, I'm done.
Great. So now just thinking about synchronous online classes, like we suddenly all had to pivot to back in March of 2020. But I can do it the same way as earlier, so I can ask them how many different ways to ask for the keys. Okay, so I can do this synchronously. I can do this the exact same way as I did in a face-to-face class. Or if I want to, I can put them in breakout rooms and give them, for example, 3 minutes to do this, or however much time is good for your level or the task. You can also, again, show it online with the sound off the first time and then the sound on, and then ask them to put their answers in the chat. Or you can put them in breakout rooms and, for example, discuss what Larry should have done, right? Okay, so it's a communicative activity to explore that language using modals and present perfect to express advice and regret and all the ways that we use that. So for novice learners, maybe I would supply some sentence frames again to follow and fill in. More intermediate learners, maybe supply a word bank. And for advanced learners, you can ask them to do this with no extra support and test their knowledge. And then for asynchronous, maybe what I'll do, or homework, and what I did do, what we do for these is post the scene on your course website if you have one. Ask students to listen and watch at home, or ask them to write or record a video giving a summary of what happened in whatever language they can use. So if it's novice level, just ask them to do it in note form, kind of just, pieces and bits and as much language as they can use. And for more advanced, they can use full sentences. But you can also do full sentences even at the novice level. Or here's another idea. You could tell your students, pretend you watched this whole scene. You were there, you were, that, or you're the monkey, right? Tell a friend about this now, and then that's a way to practice reported speech and also practice their adverbs and expressions of sequence. So we're going to skip this for now. And ta-da! Okay, we've run a little over and we so apologize. But what we would like you to do, if you have a moment to stick around, and if our hosts it's okay to still take questions.
It's a 90-minute session, Laura, so.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, don't worry. We're on time.
Okay, sorry. I'm doing so many sessions this week.
Yeah.
Oh, we were hurrying and I thought we were done at 3. Oh my gosh. Okay, so let's go back. We totally have time then.
But maybe we'll make it shorter. Maybe we make the task just 10 minutes.
Yes,
so that we still have time for questions. Okay.
Let's do that. Absolutely. Oh, okay. Sorry for all that rushing. And then when people were saying, "Oh, I'm sorry, I've got to go," I was like, "Oh, we're running over here." Okay, so we're going to give you 10 minutes, and Mark is going to put something, a cartoon, in the file, into a file. I also have a slide of it in a moment. If you would like to take a screenshot of it, I'll share that, so you can use whichever modality. But here is your task. So let me just move this over. We hope that you will be in groups of 4 or 5 people and that read together and understand actually it should say comic, not cartoon, sorry. And in your breakout rooms, discuss how you might use this comic. And be sure to kind of just determine the following. Just think about what's your context, right? So what's the age or level of the students? What's the language focus of the activity? And what do the students need to do to complete the activity? And then detail the steps that students will need to follow. So just kind of have that, sketch that out in the 10 minutes that you have together. And let me find, let's see, which way did it go? Yeah, here's the cartoon also. So you can take a screenshot of it. We're going to have 10 minutes, not 15. And then also, Mark has put it in the link. He's put the link in the chat.
Okay, and Laura and Janine, just for y'all to know, I pasted it into a doc and I typed out the words there as well, just in case anyone's having trouble visualizing it. So if you click the link, you'll see what I shared with them. But so they have the original comic along with the typed out words in case it's difficult to read. So we'll put you in breakout rooms now. Please, if someone in the room could share their screen, and that will help you talk about this. And if you're having trouble doing that, of course, as long as everyone has clicked the link and can see it on their own device, you should be able to talk about it. So let's take our 10 minutes and we'll be back here shortly.
Oh, and this is fabulous, Mark. Thank you so much.
Okay, no, you're welcome. All right, looks like we're all back.
We're back. So, oh, is this me, Laura, or is this you?
See, well, I put the slides back up. It's me.
Okay.
So, well, and that was pretty much it. We wanted to have time to for you to have a little bit of time to work on this. Again, for a couple of the groups I popped into, the idea was that we don't want you don't have to use this cartoon comic. This is a very high level comic with a lot of cultural information, and I might use this with advanced learners, college students. I wouldn't use it with kids. I might use it with teenagers, with high schoolers, because I think that they can handle a lot of really good discussion. But the whole idea of what's a girl's education. So this could be a good springboard for a discussion about that topic. But the idea isn't for you to take this comic and then try to smash it in with your students. The idea is for you to just follow the model, find a comic, and then develop these sorts of questions. What are you going to do with it? So that we just wanted to give you a little bit of practice with that.
And can I just say one thing? In the group I
please.
popped into, they had a great idea, which was underlining things like, don't worry, fine, okay, I'd prefer, or I'd like, I want, and say, okay, now find 3 other ways to express this same idea. So just developing that sort of linguistic facility of there's always more than one way to express one idea. So let's practice with that and see what we come up with.
Exactly. That is one of my favorite teaching questions to do. It's like, what are 5 ways to say this? Or, you know, for lower levels, for more novice levels, what are 2 different ways to do this? Or and then the next week say, okay, you've got these 2. Now what's a 3rd way? What's a 4th way? So that they can build. Because one of the things our students complain about a lot is that they don't have enough vocabulary and they don't have enough ways to express their thoughts, especially our young adult students. They have great thoughts. They just need the language to help them do it, and practice and opportunity. So I love what people are saying in the chat, that you're going to start a collection of these things. That's exactly what you do. Every time you see it, like every time you go to the movies, I can't go to the movies without watching with 2. I watch with my Lauda and also with my teacher eyes, because it's like, ooh, that's a good scene. And then I do research, I try to find it and I get a hold of it, and then I turn that into something else, into some activities, and I fill my files. So add these to your teaching files, your teaching portfolios for sure. So we'd like to talk now about your takeaways and give you a chance for questions while we begin taking questions. It would be great if you could write in the chat, if you haven't already. A few people already did. What is one idea or practice that we talked about today, or that you thought of as a result of today's information, that's something that you're going to take away with you and use right away, right next week? What's something that you want to do? So you can put that in the chat, and then also we'll start taking questions. Yeah, paraphrasing, great. Giving students a word bank, awesome. Realia, scramble the story, woohoo. Yeah, you know, with songs or with movie clip things too, what I'll do sometimes is I'll write things out on a big piece of paper or type them out, and then everybody gets one, mixed up order, and then from listening they have to stand up and put themselves in order. Now that's a face-to-face thing. I haven't quite figured out how to do that on Zoom yet, but we're getting there. We'll figure that out. Fill in the blanks with a song. Good. What else? And also we're ready to take questions.
Yeah. And with comics with more frames, you can actually cut those up and have the students just put them in order. Just try to understand the story. It's more comprehension, but very simple, and it works effectively with younger learners and less advanced learners. Yeah,
exactly.
So if you do have a question and you'd like to ask it personally, you can just either write your name in the chat or use the hand raise function, or just get our attention somehow, and we'll make sure you can open your microphone. Questions or comments?
A lot of people saying they want to use comics. Awesome. Movie clips. I've been using movie clips for, I mean, like Janine, actually, I'm even quite a bit older than Janine. So the dinosaurs were still roaming around when I was a young teacher, and the last of them, the Cretaceous period. And I mean, so long ago that we had to push a huge TV. We had to borrow it from the office and push it down the hall on a big cart. And that's how we showed movies and movie clips in classes. Yeah, Aida.
Okay. I've been trying to use comics in my classroom. Sometimes it has worked well, some others not. Because with comics, what I have found is that there's a lot of cultural aspects going on.
Right.
And myself, as a language learner, there are many things that I don't know about the culture.
Right.
It's like sometimes, okay, I just step back from using comics because there's a lot that I don't, sometimes it doesn't make sense. Like there's a kind of humor sometimes that I feel very distant to it.
Right.
So just wanted to make that comment about comics. I really like them, but I just sometimes I don't get it. I mean,
well, and humor is tricky because it's so culturally based, as you say, and so it's in the moment we have to explain a joke, forget it, it's not a joke anymore, right?
yes.
So I would say use comics as you can. You know, maybe find ones that are written for kids or that are like the Garfield is a great one. Because it's written for full family age, for any age. Doonesbury is the one we chose, is political and cultural humor. So that's that's a way different level. I would never use that with my students right then, my lower level.
That's what we noticed. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I agree.
Yeah, I agree too. I think if you as a teacher don't understand the joke in the comic,
Don't try it.
don't try it with your students. I do like Garfield because it's very appropriate, I think, for younger learners. And the humor is pretty simple. It's not sophisticated.
Right.
And there are a lot of things you can do with those besides like analyzing what the joke is or discussing the topic. There are other language focuses that you can have. Yeah.
I would say one other thing that you can do too, if you're having trouble understanding something, choose a comic that seems like it's, you know, appropriate for that level, and then go in with your students. This kind of goes back to my presentation at the conference. Is we want to sometimes find ways where we step back from being the teacher and we co-explore with our learners. So you can say, hey, I don't understand what this is about either. Let's see what we can figure out together. And then it opens up a whole world of possibility for our students when they're not thinking, oh, the teacher has the right answer and I have to get the right answer. It's more like, oh, we can kind of discover this together. So it becomes a kind of discovery learning, which is really potent, I think, for our students.
So
Vladislava,
Vladislava has her hand up. And then we
Yeah.
also have a question in here from Carla. So maybe Vladislava, if you want to ask your question, and then while you're doing that, either Janine or Laura can check Carla's question in the chat.
Great.
Yes.
Hello, can you hear me?
Perfect.
Yes.
Laura, I've been waiting for your presentation since the conference. I fell in love with that, and since that I was checking when it will be your turn. So I'm so happy to see you today.
Thank you.
You already answered to my question because I wanted to ask you some good ways of using comics. That was actually my question. And the song that you guys presented today, the Tom's Diner, I actually used it many times, but mostly like with activities to fill in lyrics, right, for pronunciation, like for elementary students. But today I got so many ideas, so I think that I will be back for this song that I have there saved already, like maybe for 2 years, because I don't know how else I can use that. So thank you so much. I really enjoyed the presentation. Thank you.
Yay, so glad. That's awesome. Let's see. And Carla says, oh wait, I had an idea about that, Vladislava. Oh, here's one other idea of how you could use the comics. Is I've seen teachers do this before, and I've done it, and it's really fun, where you white out all the language, and so they only have the images, and then they have to supply the language for what, and it's right if it makes sense with what is in the picture. So that's really fun, and you can use individual comics for that as well. That's a nice idea. Carla's question, Janine, I'll read this out. I think this is it.
I can see it.
Okay, yeah, I'll love to hear a couple of ideas on how to use authentic materials with first graders besides pictures. I'm teaching about animals, but I do not have access to any technology. Aha. Okay. Okay, it's been a while. It's been a minute since I taught kids.
So I'll jump in and let you think,
good.
Laura, because I remember my first times teaching abroad pre-internet. I didn't have technology either, and I used to buy newspapers, magazines, bring cassettes, DVDs. Like I sort of just had my own supply of authentic material, so it was pretty limited. It was whatever I could put in my suitcase, basically, and I couldn't predict what I would need. But if you can buy magazines, comic books, kids music DVDs, look up. You don't have access to technology. I'm guessing that means like not internet, but maybe you can play music in your class. There are lots of DVDs of kids music that has very simple and repetitive language that, anybody who's had a kid has listened to these songs a million times until you start to go crazy. But it's not very complicated language, and it's very authentic. So those would be my suggestions. You may have to invest in some of your own materials, but if you're teaching the same age level for a long time, they should be useful for you for a long time. Do you have any other suggestions, Laura?
No, those were pretty much mine. I do a lot with pictures, with language. But that's the same thing. And yeah, when I worked in places that didn't have technology, I kind of figured out ways to bring my own. So I hauled around a lot of stuff, which is not convenient, but it did help. I mean, I would sometimes carry recorders or use my computers.
Mm-hmm. Also, Dr. Seuss books are great.
Dr. Seuss books are good, are really good. Yeah.
Language is simple. They have good images that go along with, and I actually use Dr. Seuss with my university level students for learning intonation in English.
And pronunciation. Yeah, exactly.
And pronunciation and intonation, and my university level students love it.
Love Dr. Seuss.
So Dr. Seuss is like perfect for any age for so many different things. So
good
question.
Yeah. Okay, it looks like we have three. We've got Neil, Berta, and Mirna.
Oh, okay.
So why don't we start with Mirna? Mirna, if you'd like to open, go ahead.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. I just want to add something to the previous question about how to teach about animals if you don't have technology. There was one time that I had to do that with kindergarten. It was quite challenging. I am from Honduras. So at that moment, something that helped me was to ask them about their pets. Mm-hmm. So eventually that helped a lot in order to introduce new vocabulary and like the things related to that type of animals. So I don't know if in this case, it is possible for the teacher that asked about it to use this as part of the strategies for animals. Mm-hmm. Thanks. And by the way, that was a great presentation. I just wonder is it possible to have a second part of this?
We'll see. I was actually thinking we could do a whole session on just Tom's Diner. We'll see what we can do. Okay, Mark, do you want to call on someone
Sure.
here?
Yeah, Berta, let's go.
Thanks. I
There
just
you
wanted to add to the previous answer as well, because I've been in the situation, and what really worked for me in first grade was to, one of these very, very common rhyme songs that kids listen to all the time, but we invented a dance, like the Five Little Monkeys.
Oh, yeah.
Time I needed to catch the attention of the class. I would start the Five Little Monkey thing, and it worked to perfection.
What a great idea. Oh, that's brilliant. That is so awesome. Great.
Thank you so much for that suggestion.
I love
right.
it.
All right, Neil.
Yeah, just real quick. I know we're at the end of the time, but I just wanted to make 2 comments. First of all, I really enjoyed this presentation. It was great. Thank you guys so much. One thing that you didn't mention much yourselves, but that I thought was a really strong feature of a lot of the activities that you showed us, was how well you balanced the in-class groupings, the individual work, the pair work, the small groups. That was a really strong feature that you should get a separate Oscar for, but you didn't mention it yourself, so I'm saying it now. And the other thing I wanted to mention real quick was you were giving advice about grading the task according to students' level. And I've been working in the last number of weeks with a bunch of teachers in Iraq online on training them or doing professional development with them on the teaching of reading and listening. And this is what I keep saying to them all the time. Don't worry about the text. The real challenge is, what questions are you going to ask your students about the text?
Exactly.
And do not try to teach them the 120 difficult words in the text before they listen to the text, because they only need 4 of them to answer your questions. So I just wanted to pass that on to piggyback on your thoughts, so that maybe that might hit another audience for a moment. So thanks a lot, much appreciated.
Thank you so much. Those are fabulous. That's a really great suggestion. And yeah, thank you so much.
It's just so important and really overlooked, that teachers feel like, I have to make them understand everything. No, you don't. As long as you don't ask them to understand everything, find another task that they can do successfully. So thank you so much, Neil, for emphasizing that, re-emphasizing that.
I think a mistake that people make to kind of go on to what both of you have said, I think a mistake that some teachers make too is that then they think, if I just give them the vocabulary, then they'll be able to understand it. And it ends up being this just like deadly presentation of vocabulary. This means this, and this means this, and maybe you have pictures, but it's deadly. It sucks all the life out of anything that you do. So I think your suggestion, Neil, is perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you.
The purpose of using an authentic material when you turn it into something that's so boring students want to jump out of.
Yeah, exactly. Looks like Katya has a question.
Do we have time for that, Mark?
Yeah, I think this will be our last one. Go ahead, Katya.
First of all, I want to thank this great session. I enjoyed it a lot. I don't know if it's a question or more a comment. I learned that depending of the level of the students, we have to adapt the text or the material that we have to use. And you told us that it's better not to change it, right? So how can I
What's the answer?
Okay, I have an answer. Janine, do you want to take that one?
I'll take it, and I'll let you pop in. We may have totally different answers. I don't think there's anything wrong, Katya, with taking a text and simplifying it for students if the goal is for them to fully comprehend it, and the original is too difficult for them. If you think about graded readers, we have beginning students or intermediate students reading Shakespeare and Arthur Conan Doyle and all these classic authors that they could never read in the original. And that's useful because they get reading practice and it's at a level that they can comprehend. So I don't think there's anything wrong with that. what we're trying to say is something different, that it's really exciting and confidence building for students when then they can encounter real language that they know is real and has not been simplified for them, and they can succeed at some task with that unsimplified, real, authentic language. So I think there's plenty of room to do both in your classes. I'm not saying never simplify anything. That would be for a different purpose, getting them to be able to understand everything. The thing about bringing in a movie clip or a song is it's way more exciting and fun, and you want to bring that in, but just don't expect them to be able to understand everything.
Right. So that exactly, I completely agree with that. And then the other thing though, is that what the trick is with using authentic materials is you don't want to grade the material, but you can grade what you do to prepare them to get ready. So we want to scaffold them quite a bit, you know, and do things like that ladle picture, right? I use that ladle picture beforehand. I also have a slide with like 5 different egg dishes, for example, that I'll sometimes use to just introduce, you know, like the whole topic. But then that's not authentic materials anymore. That's just preparing them to use the authentic material. So I'm getting them to think about, you know, dishes and foods and ingredients and the names of things and cooking technique, you know, cooking verbs, for example, or utensils. So all that stuff we can build in ahead of time. You can do that ahead of time, or you can kind of scaffold it afterwards too, in terms of the activities that we're asking them. But for authentic materials, you want to leave the material pure to keep it truly authentic. Thank you to those who have to leave. I think that's it, right?
For like 10 minutes. So sorry about that.
No problem,
But
no
it's so
problem.
fun to talk with you guys.
You are so dedicated, every one of you. This is Friday night here for you almost. And kudos to all of you dedicated, motivated teachers. Your students are lucky to have you as teachers.
Well, this is as good as a moment as any to ask our audience to please give a warm round of applause or message in the chat or waving your hands to show your appreciation for the session that we just received from Janine and Laura. So thanks again so much for being willing to dedicate your time with us this Friday afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks so much. Have a great weekend.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.